All right, recording has started, and this is the July 13th, 2023 Crossplane community meeting. Lots of stuff to talk about today, as we're kind of moving on into the final days of the 1.13 release. I don't think there's a big surprises or anything majorly contentious left there, so I don't expect the agenda to take super long today, but I definitely want to make space as we're at an important phase of the milestone here, getting close to a release. All right, so let's just jump on. Actually, let me do something real quick. Let me share into the chat a direct link to the agenda doc, so that if anybody wants to add topics to the agenda that they that are not currently included, that they can do that now. All right, so 1.13 coming up hot. So we started the feature freeze window this week. The current plans, or the plans as they have always been, is to do the release the last week of July. So we're targeting around the 25th or so. So 2 weeks before the release, we go into feature freeze. And then 1 week before the release, we go into code freeze. So we're in the feature freeze now. There may be a couple things that are still in flight that we'll definitely want to talk about. But we're kind of starting to get to the baking time, and we're converging on the final release here. So let's first talk real quick at the highest level about the things that are part of the 1.13 roadmap. And so I think that there's a couple things that are already completed here, and then there's a couple things that I would love to get the latest update on. One of the ones that is top of mind for me is going to be the security audit stuff, and then also the ignore changes, or the evolving the management policies API part of observe only resources to enable you to ignore changes as well. So let's see who is on the call here today. Okay, both Philippe and Lovo are. So let's just start top to bottom here. Philippe, can you give us a quick update on where we are with all the findings from the security audit and the fixes for vulnerabilities that we want to get included in the 1.13 release?
Sure. So we are targeting to release the security report together with 1.13. So we are still working on a few final, let's say, more controversial issues that were shared. Nothing too worrisome, but still we are still deciding on the severity and deciding on the actual fix. We have draft PRs for each of them, obviously not yet public, but we are discussing patches, and I don't see any major issue or any blocker to have that all the fixes in by 1.14 and backported to all the required releases, so that we can have the report published alongside the release.
So awesome, Philippe. That sounds good, and it sounds like there's maybe two major avenues here. One is like for the vulnerabilities, making sure that we make final decisions on severity, or if we want to do a CVE and all that sort of stuff. Do you want to just, or do you feel like we need to just get together and sync and make final decisions on those, or are we mostly wrapped up on that?
We could probably schedule a meeting. Maybe it would be better to have a synchronous meeting. So yeah, if we manage to do that tomorrow, maybe, because I know Nick is going to not to be here next week, I think. Otherwise, we can schedule it early next week and discuss it with who's still here.
And so I think that kind of gets to the second part of deciding what the technical fixes are. And so, in my opinion, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like maybe you or Hassan's opinions are going to be most important for the technical decision of how we patch some of these things, and what we do in the code base. We probably want your opinions for that. But in terms of figuring out severity and CVEs and stuff like that, I feel like Philippe, you and I can make those decisions together. And maybe that's not critical for Nick or Hassan's feedback there. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think any of this needs to, from what I've seen playing along so far. I haven't looked recently, but I don't think any of it needs to block on me. I'll try and help, but if we don't get around to getting my input, I trust Hassan to make decisions on things.
Awesome. That sounds good then. So Philippe, that if you want to kind of take it as a two-pronged approach here of you and I, let's get together and make final decisions on severities and stuff like that. That's fine. And then you and Hassan can work together during EU daytime hours to get the patches in, approved, and the technical decisions done.
Sounds good. I'll schedule meetings for both of things.
All right, sounds good, man. Sounds good. Thank you for continuing to drive this. And then just to confirm as well, I will be doing, it's on my agenda to do the blog post for the security audit still too. Yep, so I'll take care of that, man. All right, so that's big stuff there, security audit. I really like where we're going with this and the continuing to progress our security posture and continuing to mature the project. I really like what's coming out of this. So really happy to have that in 1.13. All right, now let's talk about the granular management policies. Lovro, can you give us an update on what's still left to land in there and any impact that has on 1.13 and the releases and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So the granular management policy, like basic function, is mostly still in reviews. The good thing is that it's connected with the providers, not with Crossplane itself. So we are planning to release this with the providers, well, with the official providers anyway, by the end of July as well. So it doesn't directly impact Crossplane. There may be like a mismatch in what Crossplane, which Crossplane runtime Crossplane is using and which Crossplane runtime the providers will be using, but I hope that won't happen. And anyway, it already is a mismatch. They're not using the same version. But yeah, so the basic functionality is ready, just sitting in reviews. We are hoping it will get approved and merged soon. And init provider is still in progress. The feature for like having a special field for creating resources. So I hope to wrap this up like by the end of next week, so we can have time to test it and ship it out with the next batch of official providers.
And then, so just to confirm, the Lovro, there's nothing unmerged that is strictly required to be included in the core Crossplane v1.13 release. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. And is there anybody, like any specific reviewers that you're waiting on to make progress on any of the unmerged stuff in runtime?
Well, Hassan is back from vacation, so now I think we'll it'll go faster.
Welcome back, Hassan.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the PR right now, and Hassan and I have both approved it, so I think theoretically we're good to go.
Yeah, that would be great. Just Hassan, just press the merge button when you're ready.
Okay. All right, this could be so far the most productive 15 minutes of a community meeting ever. Then, great. All right. Cool. All right. So thanks for those updates. Then I do want to focus mostly on 1.13 today. So when we next community meeting, I think if everything goes according to schedule, we should have 1.13 out the door, and then we can start doing some more early, roadmap 1.14, 1.15 type of talking again. I think the big focus today is converging on getting 1.13 out. Let me check just real quick the 1.13 scoped project board. I think there most certainly is some things that need to be cleaned up from here. But the ask that I would have for folks is there anything on this board specifically that you want to call attention to, or you want to raise your hand that needs some help in order to kind of wrap them up for the 1.13 timeframe?
I may have one, Jared. I wrote on the issue yesterday. Yes, that dry run apply one, I'm unfortunately pretty sure it's not going to make 1.13.
Okay.
It ended up being quite a large refactor that I'm somewhat hesitant to land at the last minute. And while I would prefer to get it into 1.113 to sort of unblock people, a topic that I've got later on is we have designer, but that makes pretty large changes to functions anyway. So basically, if that design goes as planned, functions will, everyone is going to have to rewrite their functions for 1.114 because they'll work differently. So I think that basically there would be diminishing returns to making the way that functions work today work better in 1.13 if we're just going to ask people to change how they work for 1.14 anyway.
And you added that topic as an agenda item later on, Nick, is that right?
I added the design under the interesting PRs towards the end, just as a heads up, but I wanted to give a heads up that I don't think I'll, I think if I pulled out all the stops, I could get this PR done in time for 1.13, but again, it would be a pretty big change and it feels a little risky with limited benefit to sort of try and get this through at the last minute to me at the moment, unless anyone wants to make a strong case otherwise. The main symptom that the work that I was doing fixes is that we do what's called a dry run apply, which does two things. It's a kind of a weird hacky way to generate a name automatically for your composer resources during composition, and it also does some validation and kind of make sure the resources are valid. And a couple of folks pointed out correctly that we should have done that after the patch and transform stuff has run and after the function pipeline has run. But at the moment, we do it between the two. We do the patch and transform stuff, and then we dry run apply, and then we validate everything, and then we do functions. The symptom is that your functions won't get names given to them automatically. And if you were trying to, if you try to make like a patch and transform set of resources that were like half valid, and then run a bunch of functions that makes them valid, like let's say the functions add a field that's required, that won't work at the moment because they have to be valid when that dry run runs. So it is a real problem that needs fixing. I'm not sure how impactful it is, but it ended up being a lot of chopping and changing to actually fix it more than I expected. So I say my inclination is to just leave that, given that we're going to have to do that chopping and changing for the new function implementation, presuming we proceed with that, which seems likely.
Yeah, that does seem reasonable, Nick, in terms of the call you're making there. Yeah, and I see now that we've got more stuff that was added to the agenda since last time we talked, we looked at it. So yeah, let's kind of keep moving then through any other outstanding 1.13 stuff. Thanks for raising your hand on that one, Nick, and that does make sense. Anything else then for 1.13 before we keep moving through the agenda? All right. Okay, so on provider releases and such, I did not see, like we had a couple of provider releases just around the last community meeting, but I didn't see any new ones there. So if folks want to add particular provider releases and versions and stuff that have happened in the last 2 weeks, then please do add them here as a suggestion and we'll merge them in there. But I didn't remember any off the top of my head or didn't see anything in the announcements channel. Cool. So let's keep moving through the topics here. A few interesting resources that we found around the community for people writing and blogging and making videos, etc., about Crossplane. So a couple things to check out there. So click through these links if you're interested in those, and definitely let us know if there's anything else that you want to add to that as for other content that people have been writing and publishing. Quick announcement for folks that Philippe is now the newest maintainer on Core Crossplane. So congratulations, Philippe, and thank you very much for all of the tireless effort you've been putting into the project to continue moving it forward there and growing with your influence as well. Last community meeting, we announced that Bob Addleton was the latest new maintainer on Crossplane, and which is no longer true because now Philippe is the newest maintainer. So Bob still has influence and still is a maintainer, just no longer the most recent. Thank you, Philippe.
Thank you.
So speaking of maintainers, I was kind of kicking around an idea with a few folks about doing some like community feedback sessions with members of the community and adopters of Crossplane and kind of meeting with some maintainers and having some chats and getting some direct feedback one-on-one like that. I'm super interested in doing this, some of these myself, of meeting with folks and listening, and just kind of making sure we're getting a good pulse of what people are experiencing and what people want to see with the project. So I wanted to kind of throw this out to the group here today, that we want to do some of these feedback sessions, and have some meetings here. So if anybody is interested in doing that, feel free to DM me, or connect with us however you want, to express your interest in it, because I would love to sit down with you all for any numbers of you all for 30 minutes or whatever, and just listen and share some ideas together. I think it would be really, really valuable. So please do reach out to me if you have any interest in that. Cool. And so Stefan is not attending the meeting today. It looks like he's got some bumpy Wi-Fi. I like that adjective. But we did want to call out that Stefan worked on a new section in the contributing guide for observability this week. And it was generated a lot of discussion. I think there were like 60 something comments on it in the first day. So a lot of folks had some opinions on this, and it did look like it got shaped by a number of contributors to the project. But basically what this was going after is, having the intent in the project of, when something does go wrong, making sure that there is context and information available within the error message and error details, that it can be something that is resolved. So, I think that this will be a bit of an ongoing thing as well. Of, now we've got this guidance, we've all kind of aligned upon it. So we, for code that we're writing, we could be following these conventions to have good errors. But there may be some ones lingering within the project and the ecosystem as well, of providers and stuff that can benefit from taking a pass through this guidance here and incorporating it into the code base. So thank you, Stefan, for leading that effort there and everybody contributing to it. And I think this will be a valuable resource for folks that are writing code within the Crossplane ecosystem. All right, Jean, this next agenda item is yours, and I don't think you're on bumpy Wi-Fi, so I'll let you take it.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things we're currently looking at is just the overall efficiency characteristics of different real world scenarios as people try and scale up, to hundreds and thousands of MRs with the official providers. We have a few scenarios that we are evaluating and going deep to understand, the different kind of metrics involved from a performance and a utilization point of view. And this is more a call out to anybody, if you have any kind of good compositions out there that has a couple of APIs in them already, and something that you've been maybe trying to see how far you can scale it. If you're willing to share it with us, we really appreciate it, as it gives us some more different kind of combinations to have a look at, and help us understand where we can make some further improvements. And I mentioned this a few months ago, but we're still fully focused on improving the kind of efficiency of the providers to help reach a higher level of scale going forward.
And John, is there a good means to which to provide that feedback? Is there a specific Slack channel or something that you want folks to deliver this on?
I just realized I didn't add that, but I will add it to the agenda now afterwards as well, and I will add it to the announcement channel in Slack as well.
Perfect. That sounds like a great way to reach people. All right. Cool. So then it looks like we are at the agenda item here, where we want Andre to go ahead and show off some of the interesting work that he's announced to the community just, I think it was maybe last week, with the Crossplane that he's building. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and Andre, you can go ahead and introduce the project and walk us through a little bit there. I think we probably have at least 15 minutes to do that, Andre. So you don't have to be too rushed to get through it.
Still, I will respect your time and will not make it too long. Let me share my screen first, make sure that you are able to see that. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yep, I can see the GitHub repo. Yep.
Amazing. So I work for a company called Commodore, and my role is to be open source, everything open source related guy. And in my past, we already did a nice tool for developers called Helm Dashboard, which was visualizing the Helm. So this is my usual thing. And then I came across with Crossplane, and I really like the concept because I'm thinking about where do we all go with these cloud technologies and cloud providers. To be fair, I never liked the cloud providers because it's a bit too much of things to manage, and it doesn't look like developer experience to me. And now, when I see Crossplane as a concept of utilizing Kubernetes concepts for managing those big and hairy objects in the cloud, I really like it. But when I started to play with Crossplane, it was not so easy to start because it's pretty complex, and it is hard to navigate through all of the objects and understand their relations. So I understood that it's actually a really good thing to fill, really good gap to fill by creating something that will be visualizing for the guys like me, visualizing what Crossplane consists of. And this is how I came up with this Crossplane project, which is basically visualization of Crossplane resources to speed up troubleshooting, to understand the status quicker. And sorry for that. And I built a tool, and now I'm looking to share it with the community to hear the feedback and understand if we should go forward with this concept. Does it solve the problem? It's called Crossplane. I'll walk through the beginning of using it. So it's possible to install it as a Helm chart into your cluster, or you can try it without installing by downloading the binary release, which I will do. I can go to releases. Yesterday, I made a fresh release after fixing a bug. I will download the binary for my platform. I will unpack the binary, and I will run Crossplane from it. It starts the web server, which I can now open in my browser. And this is the Crossplane. The Crossplane gets visualized. I have some areas with all the main objects of Crossplane. Let's start with claims. I have some test bed in my computer. I prefer isolated environments, so I'm experimenting basically with Helm as main provider. So I have created a claim, which I can now look. It's unhealthy. There's something wrong going on with that claim. Let's dive deeper. So this is the presentation of claim. I can see that there's no recent events in the claim itself. And the biggest point of value is the ability to navigate to the root cause of the problem in the Crossplane. I can see that my claim is not ready. It was reconciled with success, but it's not ready. And I can see that it's actually because of the composite resource being not ready. And that in turn is because of the managed resource is not synchronized. I can navigate to most of these objects. For example, if I go to composite resource, I would see that my composite resource, yes, it's not healthy. And we see that it happens because of this managed resource. I can see my victim who is suffering from me being unhealthy, and this is my claim, is suffering being unhealthy. And I can see also some attributes of the object, like the status of it, the events that were happening, all good. I can review the YAML of my composite resource. Then I can go to the managed resource. Let's go first to the healthy one. I can see that it depends on some provider config, and I can see who suffers if there's problems with this specific managed resource. The composite resource, my managed resource is fine. The composite resource is unhealthy. I can navigate back to it and go and look at the problematic one. And you can see this is intentionally broken situation. I can see that my provider config is not found. It's unhealthy. I can see the events. The error message is perfectly explanatory. It says that there's not, the provider cannot work with this provider config. I can review that in my provider config, indeed, the reference is bad, and some events, status, all the options. Basically, the idea was to minimize the time I'm spending by navigating through K9S or kubectl to get this information, get to the root cause. There's no intent to replace completely kubectl because you would be fixing the problem with your kubectl or whatever process, GitOps process that you are utilizing. But to actually get to the root cause, you would go through the visual process of figuring it out. And here you go. You can navigate through various lists. Like you can go to the composite resources. You can see that there is a composite resource that is fine. This one is directly created through the YAML, and it looks all right. I don't know how is this possible, but it looks all right. But it points to the managed resource that is not synced, although it's ready. So it's kind of okay. I'm not an expert in Crossplane. I'm learning it as I go. So I'm seeing these situations make me curious. I'm starting to learn other aspects of what is possible in Crossplane. We can see all of the managed resources, for example, to understand what do we consume from the providers. We can see the providers themselves. I have a couple. Helm provider is in perfect shape. Kubernetes provider doesn't say that it has any troubles either. My compositions, I can review what I have declared as compositions and composite resource definitions. So to me as a newbie, it's really a tool to learn Crossplane. I can assume that there is certain depth that I'm missing, the third dimension of Crossplane that I'm still missing. Like I heard of composition revisions as important aspect, maybe some other things in Crossplane that I could expose here. But at this stage, I'm trying to be agile and I'm trying to see if the community would tell me that this is the right thing to do or this is the wrong thing to do, and maybe point me what is more important to dive deeper and what is less interesting. So let's keep it simplistic in this Crossplane project. If you are interested, check it out. I'm at this stage mostly looking for a feedback, as I said. You can find me in Crossplane Slack. Just tag me directly, but please, let's keep these discussions in somewhere open place, not one-to-one messages, but in the wider forum, so people can actually see that the discussion is happening and put their opinions there. And you can go to the Comoplane, find the Comoplane on GitHub. We have issue tracker. I already have fixed a couple of issues by people bringing those up, and give us a star if you like it. Thank you very much. Any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, this is sweet, Andre. Thanks for taking the time to show it today, but I guess also to write it before. That's maybe even more important than showing it today. So this is super cool, man. One quick question I had was like I love the visualizing the relationships in in the references between the resources. That really helps people kind of see what's going on under the covers. One of the example you showed, I think it was the Helm resource that was like they had a not found provider config. How was this tool able to determine that it's not found? Is that like a specific condition on this, like a status condition that it looks at, or how did it know that?
the most straightforward way. I'm getting the object, then I'm seeing the references, the important reference that it points to. For example, provider config is one of the most important references from the objects. And then I'm going to Kubernetes and I'm checking if the resource exists or not. And if it not exists, then I'm bringing that up as the problem. Because in my experiments, I figured that in many cases, I'm screwing up with my names here and there if my structure of resources gets complex. Half of my time I was suffering just because I forgot the name or did a misprint. And then my question is why my claim feeling bad, although there's the whole chain of a problem down to the managed resource suffering from missing provider config. So I implemented something that was surfacing those problems.
Got it. So you've got some logic built into, that kind of understands the, resource model of Crossplane and can kind of do validation and verification stuff.
Yes. Sometimes I have to. The Crossplane is so universal that in its code base, it doesn't force dependencies and structures in many places. It allows for free form structures. So in some places, I have to rely on de facto standards. Just every provider has provider configs provider configs to it. So I'm relying on that as a de facto standard and not something that is forced by Crossplane core. That's the life of open source project around Crossplane.
Cool. Any other questions from folks about this demo here and the tool? All right. Well, yeah, so that's, there's a link to the repo here in the agenda doc, so folks can go ahead and check it out there. And then, as Andre was mentioning, one of the things he's most interested in right now is getting feedback from folks and, kind of getting some experience and kind of continuing to shape it. So that can definitely go on with, issues in the repo here. And thanks again, Andre, for showing this to us today.
Thank you for the opportunity to work on this and speak about it.
Yeah, right on, man. Cool. All right, so then let's move on to the next agenda item. Philippe, you had something you wanted to call out for awareness here.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that we merged and that in 1.13 we'll get a change, a minor breaking change to the alpha environment configs behavior regarding label selection. So long story short, before this, using label selection to pick an environment config resulted in case of multiple matches, resulted in a random choice. Now we are, we discussed it in a few of the last SIG environment meetings and with a few folks interested in the topic, and we agreed the default behavior should have been erroring out in case multiple matches were found, but we introduced 2 modes, single and multiple. So in single mode, which is the default, we have an error in case multiple matches are found because you are expecting a single environment config to match the labels. While if you specify multiple mode with a max match, so a maximum number of matches to be picked, you can get back the old behavior, but it's not going to be randomically choosing the environment config to select, but it's going to sort them either by name or by a specified field. So there is still a way to achieve the old behavior, so it's switching to multi-mode and setting max match to 1, but we'll obviously make sure to highlight this in the release notes. But yeah, just wanted to point out this.
Awesome, Philippe. Thanks for making that well known. And then, yeah, like definitely anything we could do to kind of broadcast that and make that well known, like in the release notes, or if it needs something needs to be added to the docs about the behavior, then that's reasonable as well.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, cool. And glad to see that get merged in also to kind of continue advancing the functionality there in 1.13 also. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of PRs that folks have been calling out. So let's click on this first one here and see. Is Christopher Har, was this one that you brought up, or are you on the meeting? Oh, I don't think Christopher's here.
I think this. Well, never mind.
Oh. Let's see. Okay, so cross-account zone association and cross-account testing with Uptask, real-world example, central DNS resolver and network accounts and all the Route 53 zones and other accounts and VPCs. So it looks like this has been merged, so it's available, at least it's the recent merge. Oh. And it's possible that this is from maybe this is a stale agenda item from. Oh yeah, it is. That's my fault. I take accountability for that. Sorry, folks. I was wondering how Christopher had added something here to the agenda. He's not here. All right, that's my bad. All right, and then Nick, let's go ahead to yours then. I think we already talked about just a little bit of this, but this is a pretty important topic, I think. So I'll let you take the floor for this, and let me know if you want me to bring up anything on my screen.
Just pull up the composition functions design PR maybe, but I don't want to spend too much time going into depth on this.
Bring up the design doc as well.
Sure. Yeah, I maybe or I don't think it really matters. We could just talk about it real quick. Hopefully everyone's aware of composition functions. It's something we've been working on for a long time. The quick version of this is we have a design open that is approved as of today to change somewhat significantly how functions work in Crossplane before we make them beta. They're alpha at the moment. They're off by default. As a reminder, for alpha features in Crossplane, there's effectively no contract. We reserve the right to break them or change how they work at any time. And that allows us to basically get feedback on these features and make them better, which is, I think, what we're doing in this case. So targeting Crossplane 1.14, targeting not guaranteed, but targeting Crossplane 1.14 in October, we're hoping to get composition functions to beta. The big difference is that while we still feel that the developer experience will be the same or actually better because we're investing a lot more in developer experience in this iteration, we still feel like people are going to be academically, they're going to be writing a function. You will feel like you're writing a function to build one of these. We're thinking we're going to deploy them as long-running processes rather than OCI images that sort of start, stop, do something, start, do something, then stop. There is a dedicated special interest group meeting for this every 2 weeks. I've included a link in the agenda document here to the SIG agenda document, and in that SIG agenda document, you can see the recording of the most recent meeting if you are interested in this. And I would encourage you, if you're using functions or if you feel passionate about functions, to go read this document and be aware. If you have any dire concerns, you should probably let me know today or tomorrow, because we're likely to merge this so that folks can start working on it. The other thing that is somewhat related is a shorter, smaller design document, one-pager, that I'm currently calling package runtime config. This one has not had much review yet. I only opened it late last night. The general idea is this would replace controller config. I know that everyone uses controller config. I know that us sort of deprecating it without having a obvious replacement for it concerns some people. So now we have an obvious replacement for it. Well, proposed one at least. It's pretty similar to controller config. It really, the reasons we got rid of controller config were twofold. One, there was a long-running proposal from Dan Mangum that we basically make how Crossplane runs providers pluggable, i.e. instead of going and deploying a deployment in your Kubernetes cluster, maybe they, I don't know if we had any super concrete ideas, so I'll say something wacky like deploy it as a Lambda function or something like that, right? So we were like, controller config, is kind of turning into a template for Kubernetes deployment, but maybe these won't always be Kubernetes deployments, so we don't know if we like that. What I propose in this design is pretty quick to capture. I propose we add a flag to Crossplane that lets you turn off the default package manager behavior of making a deployment when you install a provider. The idea is if anyone out there wants to do something different than what Crossplane does today, i.e. make a provider in your Kubernetes cluster, you can run a controller alongside Crossplane that has special logic to do that. I think it's a super rare edge case. As far as I know, only Upbound has this need. So I think it's kind of reasonable, given that it's a very, very edge case thing, to instead of adding a lot of complexity and abstraction to Crossplane so that Crossplane goes and can deploy providers in 10 different ways, we should just keep what Crossplane does today, but let you opt out of that and write your own code if you want to. And so then that simplifies what Crossplane understands to be like, okay, I'm always going to make a deployment, and then we can introduce a new type that effectively looks like a better controller config that is a template for a deployment and a service account that just gives you access to all the fields of those things, rather than people having to open a PR every time they notice something that a deployment can do that we haven't put in controller config. So go take a look. I hope basically if you've ever looked at controller config and thought, oh, I wish this had volume support, or I wish this had label selector support, or I wish whatever like that, that should all just be there by default under this design. That's it. Yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going on vacation on Tuesday. So if anyone has any thoughts about this, I would encourage you to let me know pretty soon.
Awesome, Nick. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to walk us through that and kind of understand the objectives for your proposals and the impact of them as well. That's really, really helpful. And I know a lot of folks do use controller config right now. And so it would be helpful for folks that are using it to make sure that this kind of, addresses the needs that they have. So feedback would be appreciated. All right. And then the last thing we've got on the agenda here is Roberto for migrating large infrastructure from Terraform and then AWS rate limiting. I guess that comes along with that, perhaps.
Indeed. Yeah, we're starting to discuss internally in the company that I work on. It's Wildlife Studios. We're trying to. We've been using Crossplane for a while for the internal APIs that we're doing. And we still have a bunch of infrastructure in Terraform, but we were starting to think like, oh, is it okay to actually migrate that infrastructure as well into Crossplane resources? And one thing that we've noticed while trying to do some of that stuff is that AWS has a pretty aggressive rate limiting approach, especially for like Route 53 and stuff. So having a constant reconciliation loop trying to apply those changes is not really the best for the cloud provider itself, right? I would like to know if you guys seeing any other companies doing things at a bigger, like at a larger scale to have some issues or something like that, or something that we should be aware of.
Roberto, are you already using like the like the max reconcile rate or whatever the parameter's called to kind of adjust like the global reconciliation rate that the provider as a whole is using?
Yeah. We are able to set it to like only reconcile each resource every like hour or so. So that would reduce the amount of calls significantly. But the idea behind having the constant reconciliation loop is basically whenever something changes, you can have a faster, like if someone changes something manually on the cloud, you can have it be reconciled back to the original state as fast as possible. So I don't know if that's a good way to solve it. I'm not sure. I would like to discuss that.
Yeah, and I think there's someone could keep me honest here, but I think there's a couple different parameters that you can specify. One is like the sync rate, or I can't remember the names, but it kind of influences like the periodic rate of time that like a resource will be checked again for a delta between the actual state and the desired state. And there's also kind of like more like a a global rate limiter, which kind of, for all the controllers, limits the number of reconciliations, or, that they could be doing in parallel, or like the number, like the frequency at which they could be trying to execute. And they're two separate parameters. So I don't, and maybe you've already looked at both and seen that doesn't resolve the situation, but I know there's more than one parameter that affects the behavior of syncing here that could be at play, that could be interesting.
Yeah, I think I mostly played around with the max reconcile rates. But yeah, I'll take a look at this other parameter for the global rate limiting there.
Yeah, does somebody know it off the top of their head? Because it's just kind of a little hazy from recollection here. But like or do we have documentation that's easy to point at for the different couple different ways there is to influence the reconciliation throughput, let's say?
I believe the key one is just max reconcile rate, and that does in and of itself like tune a couple of other things. Like if you give a bigger max reconcile rate, will allow more client throughput to the API server, and a couple of other things that we think are necessary to achieve the max reconcile rate. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if or where there is documentation of that. There should be.
I'll sure look into it. Thank you.
I was gonna say one thing. I don't know if it would kind of be outside of Crossplane, but if you could trigger something through CloudTrail, whenever like a non-service account edits something, causing a manual reconciliation of the Crossplane resource, that way you can still have a high reconciliation, or you can, make sure your reconciliation is like an hour, but have changes that are done manually be done through Crossplane at the time that they happen through CloudTrail or something like that. Maybe something of interest to look into.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach as well. I don't know if anyone has done that before, but I'll look into it.
And I have linked the documentation to the up-down sizing guide.
Thank you.
In the Zoom chat, Clement?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and Blake, thanks for sharing that idea as well about CloudTrail. That's definitely interesting, and like a nice creative way to think about it too. Sweet. So yeah, so Roberto, let us know if, like, for the documentation, I would take a quick look after this as well to see if there's further documentation I was thinking of. And if there's not, this very much could be a nice candidate for another upcoming like blog post or something to kind of share this topic, but then also make sure that that gets into the documentation if it's not there too. So we can sync up on that too, man.
But you haven't seen any other companies doing this and having issues or something related, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the migration stuff or the importing stuff that I've seen tends to have, I haven't seen like a big scale throughput of that. I've seen folks doing migrations, but like kind of more like a project by project basis and kind of going a little bit more slowly with it. So I don't think that this exact scenario, I don't know, I can't remember having myself talk to somebody about it.
Got it. Sounds good. I'll try some things out and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Roberto. Definitely appreciate it. Cool. All right, so that was the last of the agenda items here. So if folks have more things they want to bring up, the floor is open for that. And while you were thinking about that, keep in mind here that the major focus for the next 2 weeks or so is going to be getting on 1.13 and getting that out the door. We expect around July 25th. If anybody's blocked on anything while we're in this critical phase for converging on the release and feature freeze, code freeze, do let us know so we can make sure we're getting attention on things so that everything can get out the door and we can have a successful quality release again. So with that being said, anything else that folks want to add to the agenda before we adjourn? All right. Well, then if that's everything, we'll keep working on 1.13, and hopefully by the time we meet next time, we will have that release out. We'll be able to celebrate a little bit. All right. Good to see everybody. Thanks for stopping by today. And thanks again, Andre, for the demo, man.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care.